It's week 3 here on Inside the Zone with Justin Kinney of Optimum Performance Sports, and we have found out what we think we know, what we think we don't know, and what we don't know we think we know. I think we're kind of at that point because a lot of teams are entering conference play. So you've had sort of an inequality of classifications. Now it's teams playing teams that are like themselves in conference play. But let's go through the first couple of weeks. What do we think we know about the high school football season in the landscape of Northeast Indiana after 2 weeks?
What we think we know is Deuce Taylor and Jeff Becker are very, very, very good at quarterback. What we do know is East Noble is still very, very, very good. And we think in the ACAC, we think we know that Adams Central and South Adams are on a collision course once again. So I think those three things we can at least be firm in saying these are facts.
So we saw, even though Northside lost to Bishop Dwenger, we saw them, I think, take a step forward as a program. And I think the sentiment at the end of the game was one of the players from Northside said, we'll see you in sectionals.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, yeah, we will.
Right?
Like,
Let's
that's
hope so.
really good.
Right?
And I think Northside got a barometer of where they need to be to compete for a sectional championship. So what do we know about the SAC? Because Snyder has played, we talk about the gauntlet that Northside had. I mean, it's not easy to go out and play Northside and then go out and play Carroll either.
Right.
If you're the Snyder Panthers, right out of the gate with a lot of new faces.
Yeah.
What do we know about them and what can we expect going forward? Because this does look like more of a rebuilding process than we thought for them, but you have to have confidence in the history of the program, Kurt Tittman, and what they're doing at Snyder, that they'll get it figured out. And they've got dudes like Dominic Moon and DJ Moore. They're going to play high-level Division I football.
Well, we always say with Snyder, they don't rebuild, they reload, but maybe they do have to rebuild in 2020. They graduated so much from last year. What was it, 37 seniors, something like that? Not even starters, but backups to starters graduated. So it's really very much a rebuild at Snyder, because not just with personnel, but also in terms of being able to line up, people in being able to get in the right sets offensively and defensively. I mean, in a lot of ways, they're starting at a foundation with a lot of these players, but I can guarantee you still a heck of a lot of talent at Snyder. And that sophomore class who dominated the freshman games last year, now sophomores, I expect to see more and more of those guys on the field on Friday nights as we move throughout the season. So I see a momentary one-season hiccup for the Snyder Panthers.
Is Bishop Dwenger still the team to beat? I think that's been fairly well established, but I want to see Bishop Dwenger play Carroll at this point. I mean, to me, right now, obviously we'll know more about where Carroll's at when they play Northside. It'll be their toughest contest of the season so far this coming Friday. But right now, it looks like Carroll and their high-powered offense and their defense is kind of getting overlooked. It's been pretty good, too, against Bishop Dwenger later in the season. How would you stack up the SAC in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4?
Right now, I think you look at Bishop Dwenger, number 1, and Carroll 2, only because they don't have a marquee win yet. I mean, they beat Snyder, they beat Lures. This week will be the biggest test of the season for them up to this time, and particularly that back end of that defense. Really hasn't been challenged much. Deuce Taylor and those wide receivers, Adrian Sewell, Jordan Turner, those guys are going to challenge Carroll on the defensive side. So right now I go Dwenger, I go Carroll, I go North Side right now. And I think this game this Friday will decide that 2 spot. And then I'm putting Homestead in there because of what we saw last Friday against a very good Concordia team to shut them out. And I think offensively they're still figuring some things out. But I think right now, when Homestead is at 100%, they're number 4.
Outside of the SAC, we're going to talk about some big games as the Northeast 8 gets rolling this week. And for East Noble, we wondered where they were in week 1 against Plymouth. Now they go to Northwood, a very good program, and pull out a 1-point win.
Yeah.
As they roll into Northeast 8 conference play, are they still the team to beat in your eyes, or has Leo? I know Leo lost to Mooresville. Mooresville's like 4th in 4A, and obviously a very good team. And of course, they didn't know about that game until officially on Thursday.
Yeah, right.
But who's the team to beat in that conference based on what we've seen after the first 2 weeks of non-conference play?
It still remains East Noble. I mean, you have to be impressed with their first 2 wins of the season against who they've played, Plymouth and Northwood. They get Penn, of course, next week at home, which will be a crazy atmosphere and a crazy game. You know, East Noble's there. I think Leo, they learned a lot about themselves last Friday. it didn't hurt anybody. They go out, they play a non-conference team that's really good. Jared Sauter goes into the weekend going, okay, now I know exactly what we need to work on and where we need to get better heading into the conference season. So no harm, no foul for Leo. They get to refocus. They're still in the NE8 race going into the thick of the conference season. So I think maybe the gap is closed a little bit between East Noble and Leo, but I wouldn't count out teams like New Haven, a Norwell team that I think can challenge Leo this weekend. Columbia City's sitting there that's looked impressive 2 straight weeks. So still a lot of intrigue in the NE8.
That was my next point, is how close are the next tier of teams that are knocking on the door? As you mentioned, Columbia City has looked really good, especially offensively in the early going. Gregory Bolt, looks the part and plays the part when you look at the stats at the end of the game. They've got Belmont at home. It'll be Belmont's first game. Who knows how they're going to fare. Norwell at Leo is kind of the marquee game for the Northeast State in this week. You're talking about a Norwell defense that's given up 7 points in 2 games. What do you see as being the big key in this one? Because Leo, obviously, with Caden Miller, that guy can hit, full speed in about 3 steps.
Yeah.
So how do you see this one playing out, and what's going to be the key? Because this game was like, you could argue this was the game of the year last year down in Norwell when it was 3-2.
Yeah.
3-2.
That late 3-run homer was clutch for Leo.
Earl Weaver playing for those 3-run homers back in the day.
This is a game similar to Dwenger last week, Dwenger Northside, where let's see where Norwell is, because we feel like they're better. And this game last year was close, but we feel, okay, let's get a better read on Norwell with a better quality opponent coming off a loss too. So I think Leo will be fired up for it. So is Norwell ready to hang consistently with the best in the Northeast 8? We saw it in flashes last year, but not consistently. I see this year with a team that's better than a year ago at Norwell. Josh Gerber, this could be a really statement-making game on Friday. Not necessarily if they win, but also if they compete, similar to how we came out of last Friday with Northside.
Okay, so let's talk about the ACAC, because I think this is a game where you talk about the top 3 teams in the ACAC are going to be, South Adams, Adams Central, and Bluffton. And the question coming into this year is, can Bluffton close the gap a little bit because of the continual success we've seen of the Starfires and the Jets? This is a week. Bluffton's won a couple of games. They haven't really. It was 22-0 last week, but they haven't really, against Manchester, they haven't blown someone out, know? And with Hayden Nern back at quarterback, Cody Middlestead, you kind of think that they had the potential to do that. How do you see this one playing out Friday night in Bern when they travel to South Adams? Because if you're Bluffton, this is a game that if you want to win a conference championship, you're going to have to go down there and beat them.
You have to find a way for the Bluffton defense to get some stops. I don't see Bluffton being able to go out there and score 40 against South Adams. I don't see it happening. So to be a contender Friday night, you have to find a way to get stops. You need to create some turnovers. And that South Adams offense has just been a juggernaut. We felt, okay, them going to Cass last week, good barometer game against a really good team in Central Indiana.
They went 11-2 last year.
Yeah, you felt like, okay, this is a predominantly a good team out of Howard County, and Arnold throws for 5 touchdowns in the first half. It's a blowout, right? So for Bluffton, I think the key is similar to where we are with Norwell, similar to where we are to Northside. We're not about to crown a team can be a contender if they don't play a contender tough. And we saw that with Northside. Norwell has that opportunity. Bluffton has that opportunity this year. Everybody that says, look at us, we beat this team and that team, until you beat or contend with a really good team, you're not going to be put in the conversation with those other squads.
If you're South Adams, though, you've played 2 games. It's been a really weird year, obviously, and Adams County has been at the
epicenter of the thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you haven't been played close. Like, you haven't been in a game that you've had to even really win in the 3rd quarter or the 4th quarter. You've won in the first half.
Yeah.
So knowing that you're going to be in a game that if Bluffton plays up to its potential, the second half is going to matter.
Right.
How do you make sure that you're on track and you're ready to go for that?
I think Grant Mosier would welcome that second half challenge, because if you remember last year, they didn't have that in the regular season, and then they get into regional and they have to have those clutch moments in the second half, and they were nowhere to be found, and they lose to Adams Central. So I think, Grant Mosier was hoping when he added Cass, okay, we're going to have a challenging game. That ended up not happening. Now he's hoping. He wants Bluffton to be better, to challenge him. He wants that Adams Central South Adams game to be a lot closer in the regular season. He welcomes these challenges because until his kids get into those situations, he doesn't really know how they're going to react. And they failed the test last year in regional. He wants a little earlier test for them to prep for the postseason this year, because even just 2 weeks in, we're already looking at South Adams going, who is better than this team in 1A?
That's
the
true.
Same question we were asking last year. It ended prematurely last year. Coach Mosier wants to make sure it doesn't happen again.
You know, and at this point, if you're in 1A, you're kind of, as long as nobody in front of you loses, like, it's going to be hard for you to move up.
Yeah.
You might be the best team,
Right.
but if a team started ahead of you in a preseason poll, you're probably not going to jump them.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. Let's talk about the NECC, because we saw Eastside last week go into Adams Central. That was one of the premier small school games in the state.
Yeah.
They doubled them up, 28-14. Looked pretty good doing it. Laven Davis, Wade Miller. Eastside was, they were who we thought they were.
Right.
You know, they looked like a really good, solid football team all around. This week it's West Noble. West Noble obviously graduated a ton of key players from last year's team. Is Eastside the best team in the NECC regardless of small school, big school? Because, I mean, we've seen Angola play pretty well, and
Yeah.
they're a 4A school, and they're big, and the history of the last year notwithstanding, the last 4 or 5 years, they've really turned it up a notch with Andy Thomas. But, man, Eastside looks good.
Yeah. Yes, right now, I think we're still putting a TBD on Angola. We've only seen them play one game.
Mm-hmm.
But, man, to go to the landing strip and get a win last week, you know, people will say I was flying on the radar. It's in Sleepy Monroe, but it was a very competitive game for Eastside to go there and do what they did and get a win. You know, last year Adams Central kind of woke us up when they went to Eastside last year and got a win. And now I think you look at this year and say, okay, Eastside going to Adams Central, they're going to win 10, 11 games, and you have to be impressed with what Eastside did. And I think, to your point, they're the most complete team on both sides of the football in the NECC. Nobody competes with them in the small school division, in my opinion. And it's hard-pressed to find a team in the big school division that can do it.
When you take a look at the small school division, we got Churubusco has been one of the teams always consistently near the top, if not at the top. They've got Garrett this week. Normally that's a game with a lot of juice.
Yeah.
Garrett's coming off what turned out to be a bye week for them.
Mm-hmm.
Their quarterback was injured in week 1. Churubusco, not a great showing in week 1 against a good Central Noble team, but
Yeah.
they bounced back and win 43-0 in their home opener last week. How much confidence does that give this Busco team going forward, and what do you kind of expect? Just like a regular old school Garrett Busco
Grind it out
kind
type
of,
game?
yeah.
Yeah, you look at Churubusco, and they're very much like Snyder Light in that they lost so much production from a year ago, and they're introducing a lot of new kids. They looked lost at times in week 1, looked better last week. I think, you know, when Nick Nondorf is on, he's as good as anybody in that conference. You add Hunter Bayansky there, who's so physical up front. He can also carry the ball. 2 big weapons for Churubusco going forward, both with, you know, one's a junior, one's a sophomore. So better days are ahead. Garrett, hopefully they use that week off to get a little healthier. You know, already we were talking about Garrett and injuries out of week 1. So we expect the Railroaders to be better, but with injuries, sidelining guys, you never know who's going to be out here or there based on coronavirus and quarantine. That's always the unknown, right? Every single week going into a Friday going, is this team going to be 100%? Is this team going to be 100%? So it's tough to judge teams. It's so easy most years to go wins, losses. Okay, I can judge teams based on that. But then you look at, okay, this team was missing these kids this week, and this team was missing these kids. You have to look a little bit more in depth to figure out who are some of the better teams in the area.
What are you most looking forward to about week 3? Because, you know, as we said at the top of the show, you know, for a lot of these teams, the first 2 weeks are a feeling out process, non-conference games, just figuring out what you've got. This year was even more so with that because of the way that the offseason was. But now everybody is in conference play, is playing teams that are similar in size, that they know from years past. A lot of things don't change necessarily schematically or in terms of culture. So what are you looking forward to about week 3 as we get, you know, in earnest the conference season going?
I'm looking forward to having some people in the stands in the SAC.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun. It was sad to be at Dwenger Northside last week and just nobody being there when you knew it would have been a big crowd. And then I think in the Northeast 8, you're looking at Norwell Leo. How do the Knights match up? I think a sneaky, interesting matchup will be East Noble at Huntington North. Not that the Knights go there and lose, but I think we look at Huntington North and say that's a better team in year 2 under Bob Prescott. Let's see how good they are. Let's see how much more improved they are if they can compete for a while against East Noble. Those kinds of interdivision games now, interconference games in the NE8 in particular, are really interesting.
Where are you going to be on Friday night?
I think I'm going to end up at Northside and Carroll. I think
Should be a good one.
The battle for the over/under on total yardage for the quarterbacks is 800. Is that fair? 750
Total yardage?
total yards for Becker and Deuce.
Golly. That doesn't sound unreasonable.
I know,
I'll
right?
put it that way. It
you
doesn't
initially
sound
hear it, go,
unreasonable.
what? And then you're like, that kind of sounds right?
Yeah,
So,
it's like 300 and plus 100 running for both. It could happen.
yeah, it could happen. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to those two quarterbacks going at it, and hopefully it's a real back and forth affair, and we'll see who is that number 2 behind the Bishop Dwenger Saints as of right now.
All right. We will sort it out for you next Monday here on Inside the Zone. But for Justin, I'm Glenn. We'll see you next week.